India's Smart Cities mission. It was supposed to build this incredible, high-tech, utopian future. But now, almost a decade later, that whole dream, it seems to have just crumbled. So today, we're going to dig into what went so wrong with this massively ambitious project.
Okay, so to really understand the mission's failures, we've got to rewind the clock. Let's go back to 2015 and remember the incredible vision that was sold to the entire nation.
And look, the promise was, well, it was nothing short of revolutionary. The stated vision was to literally turn Indian cities into European standard cities. We're not just talking about a few upgrades here. This was pitched as a total ground-up transformation. And this wasn't just some vague fantasy, right? The vision was super specific, super futuristic. It promised that technology, things like AI and the Internet of Things, could solve pretty much every major urban problem you can think of, from ending traffic jams for good to finally getting clean water and affordable housing for everyone.
All right, so that was the dream, an incredible dream. But here we are, nearly a decade later. What does the reality actually look like on the ground?
And yikes, the contrast is just stark. That promise of zero traffic? Well, today it's a 2-hour crawl just to go 10 kilometers in Bangalore. The dream of clean air? The reality is that breathing in Delhi is like smoking 10 cigarettes a day. The source material we're looking at paints a really grim picture of just how big this disconnect is. This huge gap just begs the question, right? What went so incredibly wrong? To find the answer, first you have to understand the sheer scale of the problem this whole mission was trying to tackle in the first place. You see, at its heart, the problem is this massive economic imbalance. You've got India's megacities, which are these economic powerhouses, and then you have the rural states, which are lagging way, way behind. This gap fuels this constant, unsustainable wave of people moving to the cities, which just puts an insane amount of pressure on the infrastructure that's already there. And the scale of this divide? It is staggering. Just look at this. According to our source, a single city, Mumbai, generates more than double the economic output of the entire state of Bihar. Think about that for a second. An entire state. That kind of economic pull is almost impossible to resist. Let's put that in more human terms. On average, a person in Mumbai makes nearly 10 times more money than a person in Bihar. 10 times. This creates a vicious cycle, right? You get a brain drain from the rural areas, and at the same time, you get this suffocating overcrowding in the cities. So, with all that in mind, we can really start to dissect why this mission failed. The idea was revolutionary for sure, but our source points to these critical breakdowns in 3 key areas: funding, strategy, and just plain old execution. Now, you'd probably think the main issue was a lack of money, right? But nope, that wasn't it at all. In fact, by the end of 2017, a jaw-dropping 93% of the funds that had been released for the mission were just sitting there, completely unspent. The money was there, it just wasn't being used. So why? Why wasn't this mountain of cash being used? Well, the reason was pure bureaucracy. Years after the launch, most of these projects were still completely stuck in the planning stage, just bogged down in paperwork, unable to even get the required project reports submitted. Faced with all these delays, the whole strategy started to shift. Instead of trying to transform entire cities anymore, the focus narrowed down to something called area-based development. Basically, the new idea was to create these small, perfect little showrooms of modernity inside a much larger and still very broken city. Let's take Jaipur as a classic example. All the smart city money got poured into the old, historic walled city. And yeah, that part of town got new streetlights, paved footpaths, freshly painted walls. They looked great. But the second you stepped outside this prettied-up showroom, back into the areas where most people actually live, nothing had changed. Same broken roads, same bad drainage, same traffic chaos. So what you ended up with were these little islands of cosmetic upgrades. They looked good in a brochure, but they failed to solve any of the real systemic problems. As one critic so perfectly put it, we practically built monuments of bureaucratic failure and called them smart cities. And it gets worse. Beyond just creating these isolated showrooms, another flawed strategy popped up: funding these flashy, high-visibility vanity projects that did almost nothing to address the core infrastructure needs. The city of Ajmer is just a brutal case study here. Crores were spent on projects with zero lasting value, a food court that got demolished almost immediately, a replica park that's now being removed, all while the city's real, fundamental problems, broken drainage, failing sewage systems, were completely ignored. So,
Looking back at this whole decade-long experiment, what are the big lessons? Well, this really complex failure can actually be boiled down into three clear takeaways for the future of how we develop our cities.
First, power needs to be decentralized. Local governments have to have the authority to actually manage their own cities without getting stuck in all that federal red tape. Second, you have to focus on the basics first. All the smart tech in the world is useless if your roads are crumbling and your sewers are overflowing. And finally, as citizens, we have to demand a real accountability. We've got to look past the slick PR campaigns and see if real, tangible progress is actually being made on the ground.
And this whole story leaves us with a really crucial question, one that applies to any city anywhere in the world that's trying to innovate. Can a place ever truly become smart if its most basic foundations are broken?